More fun and games with that 75 lead, the Marshall. So the bass pot turned out to be defective. At its minimum setting, the signal just was cut out, and cleaning it did not help, so it's got a new alpha there. And there was not much range to the presence control, and as it came in, it had the 4.7K, and it had the 6.8K connected to these two to ground, so okay, standard 70 Sing with the 25K pot, except it's a transitional, had the 5K pot, and so it had very little range of control in the presence circuit. Since it had the 5K pot, I'm converting it to the earlier style, where this is at ground and the cap will be here, and we're going to try the stock 680 nanofarad versus the more common 100 nanofarad, so we can hear the difference on that. That'd be fun. And over here, I've got a switch so I can take the 5 nanofarad bright cap in and out. So let's see what that sounds like, shall we? Now, before we decide what's the best sound, you have to remember that everyone has a different ideal Marshall sound in their head. And I spoke to the owner about this, and he loves the Fighting album by Thin Lizzy, specifically Ballad of a Bad Man and Suicide. Now, I listened to a whole bunch of recordings of all those things. I could only find the album track of Ballad of a Bad Man. Couldn't find a good live version. A lot more available on Suicide. I'm sure this will get demonetized. Thanks, YouTube. But the recording on the album version, the guitar sound is very, very different than live. So I'm also going to show something closer to the live sound, and so the owner can make a real informed decision. So here's my closest approximation in stock form to the sound on the record. So I'm going to the high gain input on the darker channel, and I have the gain up about 4. Got the channel 1 volume, the volume 1 off, treble dimed, mids dimed, bass at 0, presence dimed, set to 0.68, though in this case it doesn't really matter which one, but I'm going to set it to 0.68. And that sounds like this. So that's kind of close to how that sounded on the record, though it sounded like they did that kind of in a rush. The speaker was real honky, and I don't think they used a great mic, or not a very modern sensibility mic. If I wanted to replicate that, I would choose maybe a Black Cone 70s Rolla and maybe an M160 and kind of a dark sounding room. Anyway, let's go closer to what you might find on the live versions. So we're going to start with no bright cap on this channel. And I'm going to turn the treble up to about 2 o'clock, mids up to about 2 o'clock, bass up a bit. I'll fine tune that. I'm going to take the presence down a little bit, and we'll hear that. So let's start with just a basic sound. And then bring up a little bit on the volume. So this is no bright cap here. Now you may think, oh wow, no, that needs to have more gain. This is pretty close to what you'd actually have on that record, or even live, because you still have that definition. Turn it up, you can get a little more fuzz. So maybe somewhere in between those. learned this riff about 10 minutes ago, so forgive me if I'm not nailing it. Remember, the impact of all this stuff changes when you have a drum kit behind you. If I had a kick and snare and the hats and all that, this would sound much, much bigger, even before we take into account compression used on recordings. You put a bass guitar down below, octave below, pumping away it on eighth notes, this sounds massive without a ton of drive. But if you want to go Van Halen, you can. Anyway, you can do that higher gain stuff. Now let's show you what difference the bright cap makes. So I'm going to go to real low gain here. Hear how it almost instantly goes into overdrive? As I mentioned in the previous video, this amp has very low headroom. And so everything from, 800 hertz and below is being turned down. Everything above 800 hertz here doesn't have much volume reduction to it. So if I were to turn this up more, that would get to be less of an effect. It gets a little bit less piercing. And it gets to be a very bright sounding amp. So for some stuff, the Van Halen stuff, that's what you want. But I think for this Finalizing stuff, we're probably gonna leave that cap bypassed. But let me show you the other things you can do if you were to jumper the channels. Let's get our core sound. Get that so it doesn't fall over. Let me get the core sound with volume 2. And just bring in a bare small amount of this. So it has a roll, but you can do that without the bright cap as well, which just putting this on a switch and comparing doesn't mean much because you have to use the tone stack differently, you have to use the presence differently, you have to balance the channels differently. I think for this purpose, going without the switch is going to be the way to go. Sorry, without the switch, definitely, but without that bright cap for this player's needs, so that if you want to do the Thin Lizzy live thing, all you got to do, I'm going to set like 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 680 nanofarad, volume 1, no bright cap. And you can always shape it from there. So this is what these do. I think we need to go the 680 nanofarad, like this came in with, but wired like the 60s Marshall with the 5K pot, not the 25K pot. And I'll just leave that bright cap disconnected. And I think this will be Thin Lizzy approved, even if my playing is not. Thanks for watching.